Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport. And you'll have to forgive the bedraggled look. It's literally a million degrees in this room, and I've been doing housework all day. I then watched the 70th anniversary Grand Prix, and that's what we're going to talk about. The excitement of 70 years of history from the first ever Formula One race, which took place at Silverstone in 1950, to the one that just happened literally about 10 minutes ago in 2020. So sit back, relax, and let's discuss the 70th anniversary Grand Prix in Great Britain at Silverstone 2020.
Welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport.
I think it speaks volumes that to have an exciting race in Formula One in 2020, it either needs to be pissing down or the track needs to be 4,000 degrees Celsius. I don't think the drivers of the 1950s would have looked favourably at that, considering, they were basically driving around in metal coffins, watching their friends die on a weekly basis. This is probably not the evolution they thought of. Formula One is definitely a different sport to what it used to be, and it's much safer, and that is a much better way of doing it. It's nice to have the greatest drivers in the world not dying, but at the same time the racing is nowhere near as interesting as it used to be, even 15-20 years ago. There were boring races back in the early 2000s, especially. Maybe even the late 90s, early 90s. But there were like a year or two where maybe there was just one team dominating too much. Williams, 92, 93 comes to mind. McLaren in the 90s. But then you had Senna and Prost battling, 89. So it wasn't all bad. Nowadays we've had 7 straight years of Hamilton, maybe Bottas, but also a ray of sunshine in Verstappen, who is a very exciting driver to watch most of the time, whether he's battling for first or more likely battling for third. This was one of those rare occasions where he was able to turn the tables just because Red Bull did something a bit different with their strategy. And it's great to see, but then that works once in the blue moon, and you're never going to mount a title challenge like that. And if this is the best car Verstappen ever has, and it is by far and away the third best car on the grid, by some margin, the fact that he was anywhere close to Mercedes is overachieving. So beating them is a great result for young Max. It still shouldn't be that way. Not after this long. Because Ferrari didn't dominate this long in the early 2000s. Their 5 years, yes, they dominated heavily. Like, no one was close to Michael Schumacher. But when he was beaten, it was by a young, up-and-coming, exciting driver, Fernando Alonso, for Renault. And that 2006 season is a very good season if you ever go back and watch it. Actually, the end of the Schumacher era, you had some very exciting drivers on the grid that made it bearable. You had Montoya and a very young Raikkonen, Alonso also very young. A young Jenson Button as well, actually. So the racing in the midfield was always spectacular. That's not always the case, and I don't think that's down to the quality of the drivers so much as the cars themselves just aren't. The technology hasn't gone the right way in terms of exciting racing. But this race was basically put down to tyres, the blistering on the Mercedes. Verstappen was able to play that. He had an extremely good first stint. That gave him the advantage, and he was able to maintain it. As for Bottas, this will be a huge disappointment. And considering the fact that Mercedes would have had all the data, best tyre engineers in the world, probably more information than any other team on the grid, considering how big an organisation they are and how dominant they have been, they pretty much set Bottas up to fall, I think, because there's no way they didn't know those tyres wouldn't have lasted another 10 laps and it might have been better for Bottas to wait. They just let Bottas pit straight away, and then when Hamilton was coming at him, he had nothing to defend with. Clearly, Bottas is number 2 driver, and clearly this is a safe World Championship for Mercedes. They're going to win this year and next year with Hamilton, with Bottas second. They're going to clean sweep with constructors. The next 2 years are pretty much sorted. I don't see Ferrari making enough gains to come back and challenge them. As well as Leclerc is driving sometimes. He makes mistakes, he is still young. When he's on it, and today he did a great job with those tyres on that car, Leclerc really does look like a top quality driver. Vettel looks like a damn fool right now. Spinning at the start, on his own, not a good look considering the season you're having. He has to be disappointed in himself. I can't see why Aston Martin will want him racing for him next year when he's showing this kind of quality in comparison to Perez, Stroll and Hülkenberg, who are doing a fine job for their team. Why would you replace any of those drivers with Vettel at the moment? Knowing how good Vettel can be, I don't think we'll ever see that driver again. Why get rid of drivers who are constantly scoring you points? Pretty much putting the car in the position it should be in. Don't think it'd be a good move for him, but there seems to be more and more things linking him to it. And it would be a weird situation. I think Racing Point really have 3 drivers there that they can use who are competitive, and putting Vettel there, they basically got another team. So unless Aston Martin end up out of team and Racing Point are going to out of team, which would be weird and stupid, don't see why you would want Vettel. That's just my opinion. I'm sure he'll probably be driving for him next year. Other than that, as I said, this was a race of the tyres. A lot of pit stops. It made it slightly interesting. Verstappen got himself in a good position. Didn't really look like losing. This wasn't Mercedes' best race. I think if the track was cooler, they would have probably run away with it. That's pretty much all there is to say about it, really. And that's always a disappointment when you're doing these videos, because there isn't really much else to discuss. Hamilton locking up and going past the safety car line. I think it looked like he slowed down before it, and it doesn't seem to be any more made of it. We'll have to see. Don't often see cars doing that anymore. That was a pretty scary moment. I'm pretty sure he had his eyes closed for a minute. It worked out for him in the end, anyway. Other drivers on the grid, Albon did a good job. I think it's hurting him that Verstappen is doing so well in the same car. He's doing a fine job picking up points, probably making sure Red Bull will finish second in the Constructors. Puts him in a difficult position regarding Gasly, because you're not going to get rid of Max Verstappen unless he leaves. So Albon and Gasly are pretty much performing at the same level. Why swap them? And they seem pretty committed to Albon anyway, so he did a good job, made some good overtakes. He's probably one of the more exciting drivers in this race today, so he did a good job. I think Stroll and Hülkenberg both did admirable jobs. Further down the grid, Renault had a bad race. They probably should have been higher. Ocon scored some points for him, but Ricciardo had a spin and dropped down. McLaren seemed to have just dropped off a cliff these last couple of weekends. I don't know if it's just this track doesn't suit them, but Sainz scored no points. Norris was only 9th. So, considering how strong they were, the second, maybe third best team, probably in between really. But they were top end of the field, scoring good points. Now they're struggling. Hope they can get it back on pace. AlphaTauri did fine. Kvyat scoring a point ahead of Gasly. I still think it's Kvyat's last year, but you know, he does a good job when the days he does a good job. But the days he does a very bad job. It wasn't his fault last weekend, but there is still the torpedo reputation hanging over him. I think he's probably done enough to secure decent drives in whatever he wants to race in. He wants to go to Le Mans, he could probably do it. He could probably get a seat in IndyCar. He can do whatever he likes. But I don't see Kvyat lasting much longer in Formula 1. Not with so many good drivers in Formula 2. Yuki Tsunoda, it might be too early for. But there are other drivers there who are definitely worth a punt. Renault has quite a few themselves. Guan Yu Zhou and Callum Ilott, very good drivers, and I think they're both Renault backed, as is Christian Lundgaard, who's looking like a pretty damn good driver. Ferrari have some good drivers in Formula 2 as well. Robert Schwartzman, Marcus Armstrong. The future is very bright for single-seater racing. I forgot Mick Schumacher. He's also a Ferrari driver. So there's plenty of drivers to choose from in Formula 2, so the Formula 1 drivers of today do need to impress this year. Because when the regulations change, there's probably going to be a big change on the grid. And we're going to see more of these young drivers moving up. It's going to mean some of the old guard are going to disappear. Don't think there's too much else to say, really. Another bad weekend for Alfa Romeo, Haas and Williams. Williams are definitely doing a much better job than last year, but they're still not scoring points. Although this wasn't a race of attrition. 19 finishes out of 20, running Magnussen not finishing. Pretty impressive. I think Grosjean had a stronger weekend. He qualified quite well. Russell did a great job in qualifying, but Latifi seemed to be doing okay in the race. Alfa Romeo just nowhere. I don't even remember seeing them in this race. So, all in all, this was probably one of the better races this year. It still wasn't the most exciting watch in the world. I've also watched Formula E. I actually watched 3 of the Formula E races today, 6, 7 and 8. So what I would recommend is, if you've never watched Formula E but you have watched Formula 1 and for some reason you're sitting here watching this, I would go to the BBC iPlayer and I would watch the Formula E races because they are far more exciting. Now I won't spoil them for you here, but the driver who is leading, he's had a good run. I'm probably going to do a Formula E reaction video because I did do a Formula E predictions video. So you should subscribe for that. And also this week there has been no content because I have been working and I'm still having problems with my internet. So SSE, you can go fuck yourselves. Your internet is terrible. I think we are going to be looking to change provider at some point, which may improve it, which would be helpful. Also with work, I'm working like 40, 50 hours a week. So fitting this family work all in a day is kind of tough, but I'm trying to do better. I have got a video in the works which will come out next week, I hope, unless the internet doesn't work at all. I'm not even sure this video will be going up because right now the internet isn't working. So if it does, thank you for watching. I hope you subscribe and come back for more motorsport content. There's some really good stuff coming up. And to everyone who has subscribed, thank you, it means a lot. And I will be back next week because the Spanish Grand Prix is on. So watch out for that. Thank you for watching and have a good one.